Alexander Hayes was one of the richest men in the country. He had built a technology empire that reached across the world and filled the sky with his company's tall glass towers. People called him the cold billionaire because he never smiled, never gave interviews, and never joined parties. On the outside, he looked like a man who had everything, but inside, his world was silent and lonely. 3 years ago, his wife Amelia had passed away after a sudden illness. Since then, Alexander's grand mansion had become nothing more than an empty shell. The only sound that broke the quiet was the soft echo of his footsteps and the voice of his little son, Ethan. The boy was 5 years old and full of light, but his legs were weak, and he needed small purple crutches to walk. Alexander loved Ethan deeply, but he didn't know how to show it anymore. Every corner of the house reminded him of Amelia, so he spent his days hiding in work. He left early in the morning and came back after midnight, long after Ethan had gone to sleep. It was easier to face the silence of his office than the memories waiting in every room of his home. Ethan grew up surrounded by nurses, teachers, and house staff who came and went. Among them was a young woman named Sophia Ramirez. She was 28, quiet, kind, and always patient. She wore simple clothes, tied her hair neatly, and always had a warm smile for Ethan. To Alexander, she was just another employee. But to Ethan, she was everything. Sophia played with him, listened to his stories, and helped him through the pain when his legs ached. She called him Warrior, and in return he called her Tia Sophia, as if she were family. One evening, something unexpected happened. Alexander finished his business meeting earlier than usual. He decided to return home without informing anyone. He wanted to surprise his staff, maybe even see his son awake for once. When he opened the grand wooden doors of his mansion, he stopped dead in his tracks. Inside the living room, Sophia was on her knees, scrubbing the floor with a rag. Next to her was Ethan, wobbling on his crutches, holding a small cloth, trying to clean the same spot. His face was bright with determination. "Tia Sophia, I can clean this part," the little boy said proudly. His small hands trembled, but he didn't stop. Sophia smiled softly. "All right, Ethan, but just a little more. You've done enough for today." Ethan shook his head. "No, Tia Sophia, we're a team. Teams don't quit early." His tiny voice was full of courage. Sophia laughed gently. "Then one more minute, my brave helper." At the door, Alexander stood frozen. His eyes widened, and his chest tightened. He could not remember the last time he had seen Ethan this happy. The boy was glowing, full of life, and it wasn't because of him. Sophia noticed him first and gasped. She stood up quickly, her face turning pale. "Mr. Hayes, I didn't know you were home so early," she stammered. "I was just finishing up the cleaning." She looked nervous, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan turned and almost lost his balance. "Dad, you're home!" he shouted with joy. He looked proud and excited, not noticing the tension in the room. "Look, Dad, I helped. I stood for 5 minutes all by myself." Alexander blinked, unsure what to say. "5 minutes?" he repeated softly. Ethan nodded eagerly. "Yes. Tia Sophia says if I practice every day, I'll be able to run soon." Sophia's eyes lowered, and she said quietly, "I was only trying to help, sir. I use my lunch breaks to do small exercises with Ethan. He enjoys it, and it helps strengthen his legs." Alexander looked at her carefully. "You're not trained for this," he said. "Where did you learn those exercises?" Sophia hesitated for a moment before answering. "When I was younger, my little brother Carlos was born with weak legs. I spent years helping him go to therapy. I learned everything I could to make him walk again." Her voice softened as she continued. "When Mrs. Hayes was alive, she found out about my brother. She told me something I'll never forget." Alexander frowned. "My wife?" Sophia nodded slowly. She said, "If anything ever happens to me, please look after Ethan. He will need someone patient." I promised her I would. The words hit Alexander like thunder. He hadn't known that Amelia had made such a plan. He felt a lump form in his throat. He realized that even after death, his wife had found a way to make sure Ethan wasn't alone. For a long time, he couldn't speak. Finally, he said quietly, "You kept your promise." Sophia nodded, her eyes shining. "Every day, sir. He's a wonderful boy. He just needs love, time, and belief." That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, thinking about what he had seen. The image of Ethan's smile kept replaying in his mind. The boy had found joy without him, and that hurt more than anything else. He went to Ethan's room late at night. The child was sleeping peacefully, his crutches neatly beside his bed. Alexander sat by him for a long while, realizing how many moments he had missed. For the first time in years, he turned off his phone and let the silence stay. The next morning, he did something unusual. He woke up early before the sun had fully risen. When he walked into the kitchen, Sophia almost dropped the bowl in her hands. "Mr. Hayes, you're awake early." He smiled faintly. "I thought I'd help make breakfast." She looked surprised. "You want to help?" Alexander nodded. "What does Ethan like for breakfast?" Sophia smiled shyly. "Hot cakes. He says they give him strength to start the week." They cooked together in quiet peace. For the first time, Alexander noticed how gently Sophia moved around the kitchen. Everything she did was done with care, just like Amelia used to do. After breakfast, they went out to the garden. Sophia laid out a mat and Ethan began his morning practice. Alexander stood nearby, watching. Ethan stretched, balanced, and tried to stand without his crutches. Sophia counted softly. 1, 2, 3, 30 seconds, she said finally. Ethan's eyes sparkled with pride. "Dad, did you see that?" Alexander nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, my son. I saw it. You were amazing." That day changed everything. Alexander canceled his morning meetings. He stayed home to watch the exercises. Every day after that, he joined Ethan and Sophia in the garden, cheering from the side as his son practiced walking. Over the next few weeks, Alexander's life began to shift. He spent more mornings at home, more lunches at the kitchen table, and more evenings reading bedtime stories. The cold mansion began to feel warm again. The laughter that had vanished since Amelia's death returned. Sophia continued to train Ethan, her patience endless. She became more than a helper. She became the heart of the household. Everyone noticed the change, even Alexander's business partners. They started to whisper that the cold billionaire had changed. One evening, Alexander invited Sophia to the library. "You've done more for Ethan than I could ever thank you for," he said sincerely. "You've given him strength and given me hope." Sophia tried to speak, but he continued. "From now on, I want you to be Ethan's official therapist. You will no longer be a maid." Sophia gasped. "But sir, I don't have a degree." Alexander smiled. "Then I'll help you get one. I'll pay for your studies, your books, everything. You deserve it." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. I promise I'll never let you or Ethan down." News of Ethan's progress soon spread. People couldn't believe how far the boy had come. Some even mocked Alexander for allowing a maid to be part of his son's life. At a charity event, one guest whispered loudly, "How strange! A billionaire letting a servant take credit for his son's recovery." Alexander turned to them calmly. "That woman," he said firmly, "did what the best doctors and all my money could not. She made my son believe in himself." The room fell silent. Sophia stood frozen, tears glimmering in her eyes. A few weeks later, Sophia received a tempting job offer from another rich businessman. His grandson had a disability, and he wanted Sophia to work for him. The offer promised double her salary and benefits for her family. Sophia didn't know what to do. She went to Alexander and told him honestly, "I don't want to leave Ethan, but this offer could change my mother's and brother's lives." Alexander stayed quiet for a long time. Then he said softly, "You don't have to choose, Sophia. I'll make sure your family is taken care of. You belong here, with us." Sophia broke down in tears. "I'll stay," she whispered, "for Ethan, for all of us." That day, Alexander realized something he hadn't before. Sophia wasn't just helping Ethan walk, she was helping him live again. Weeks passed, and one morning, Sophia announced a new goal. "Ethan, today we try to walk without crutches." Ethan looked nervous. "Do you think I can, Dad?" Alexander knelt in front of him. "I know you can, son." Ethan took a deep breath, let go of his crutches, and took one trembling step, then another, then one more. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "You did it, my little warrior," she cried. Ethan fell into his father's arms, laughing through his tears. "Dad, I walked." Alexander hugged him tightly. "You did, son. You really did." The joy of that moment washed away years of emptiness. No skyscraper, no deal, no fortune could compare to that feeling. From that day forward, the mansion came alive. Ethan grew stronger every week. Alexander smiled more, laughed more, and finally understood what his wife had meant when she told him family mattered most. One evening, Alexander found Sophia sitting on a bench in the garden looking at the stars. He sat beside her quietly. "I used to think my success was measured by numbers," he said softly. "But you and Ethan showed me something different." Sophia looked at him gently. "You just needed to remember what love feels like, Mr. Hayes." Alexander turned to her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You brought it back into my life, Sophia." Their bond deepened, built not on wealth or position, but on shared love and healing. In time, Alexander asked Sophia to stay by his side, not just as Ethan's teacher, but as family. She hesitated, tears in her eyes, then nodded. They married quietly in the same garden where Ethan had taken his first steps. The guests were few, but the joy was endless. Ethan, wearing a tiny suit, held Sophia's hand proudly. "Now we're the dream team, Dad," he said with a grin. Alexander looked at them both, the boy who had learned to walk and the woman who had taught him how, and felt something he hadn't in years: peace. And from that day, the cold billionaire was gone. In his place stood a man who understood that true wealth wasn't in buildings or power, but in family, love, and the small hands that reached for his every morning.